Okay. For today, let's start with our discussion. Just a couple of comments. I know some of you have been struggling with the Sage software. I know that it's not working in every occasion, especially here on campus. Some machines work, some machines don't. Some people, Tom's had to reinstall his, or reload his, or uninstall and reload. Anybody else having, if you installed it at home, has it locked up on you also?
Yeah,
So how have you solved it?
I have to, they go to Israel, you cannot open, right? And then they can go to, they said can fix it. They have to do to fix it like they have just told you to fix it and then you click it, it seems like it's gonna be download again.
So you got to download the software again?
Yeah, they have the button for you to follow instructions. But each computer is like if you download 2018,
Yeah.
you cannot do again.
Well, you have to uninstall first before you can download it again. Correct.
Yeah.
Ruby, did you have to do that?
I have trouble with the reports. It like shut me down.
Yes, that's the problem. So how did you figure it out? Whether you're able
I
to,
use the other method. I go to
2017?
yeah no
No?
I go to the what is it called? But you have to, instead of going to the reports, you go to the
Business status?
yes,
Yeah,
that one.
that's how I got
I
around it
use
as well,
that.
because when I would click on reports, it would shut me out like it did before.
Yes, yes.
And on a different one, it told you to go to business status.
On the top one, right?
Yeah,
Right.
Find a
Right.
report.
find reports.
Yep,
Yeah, on the
business
top
status.
one.
And then go
And
down.
then use the arrow to go down, to scroll down, the scroll bar, sorry. On the, all the way on the side.
Find it. Find
No?
report.
You tell me how to do it.
There.
And then find
Yeah,
a
we
report.
have
Oh.
right there.
I use that one.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
In the textbook tell us to do this way.
Oh, that's good to know.
That is good to know.
Yeah, and then you can
That
change
worked
it
for
like
you.
normal.
Okay, that's good to know.
And that's how I got to all my general ledgers.
Me too.
Okay.
I use the.
That is bizarre. Why would work there and not?
Yeah, because when I try to use on top before I have to reinstall mine, it just crashes every time I go
Yeah.
try
Yes.
to find a report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super.
That's
So once you did,
For the rest of the time.
I'm used
so
to it.
that helped you.
That's in chapter 2, right?
Because you can find any report.
It's in chapter 2.
Okay, so let's review what we did.
Go to sub company, right?
Business
Sub-company.
status,
Yes,
right?
hit that first and go in the bottom.
Use the scroll bar to scroll down.
In the
Memory
bottom.
down and then find the
And
category
knowledge,
and then pick the report from that section and then it works. Super job, guys. Awesome. That makes me extremely
I just don't
happy.
remember where it is.
I have to go. Make them-
For those at home, are you okay with finding it under business status, the reports that we need? That's huge. I gotta find you here, guys. Sorry. Okay, good job.
It's on the page 63.
63, page 63 in our book has the instructions to use the business status if you're interested in going that direction. Awesome, that's great to hear. So, I do have due dates on these case problems. I don't enforce them. I don't add a penalty point for them, basically because I know there's trouble with the software. So keep that in mind. I'm hoping this solution that we've found with the reports will help us so that we don't have to keep reinstalling and so forth. That's the hope here anyway. So, getting back to our overview and what we will do next week, I will hand next week because it's the day before our spring break, the Net Solutions project. This is the big project that you will basically get a packet of information. It's about 18 pages long. And you basically will set up a new company in Sage and actually do a month's worth of transactions. And there's other things that are entailed into this project, but that's what we'll be talking about next week. So
And all the information is basing off of the first couple of chapters that we learned.
what we need to get done first will be based on the first 4 chapters that we've gotten through, for the most part. The only thing that I won't get through, and which is easy to do, I'll discuss it next week, is the sales tax code, which is going to be Wisconsin sales tax, how to set that up. But for the most part, it's pretty, what we've covered will be what's due when you return on the 26th of March. And then that's when we'll pick up again with our SAGE chapter discussion. So, that's the game plan. Anybody not going to be here next week? Because I could give you a packet today if you needed one.
What
So,
packet?
the Net Solutions project, I could get, I'd have to go to my office and get one. But
That's for chapter 4.
no, the Net Solutions project is for,
Next week.
that's our big TSA project in the course. So,
Okay.
yeah. All right. So let's look at our overview for chapter 3 then. And again, my concept here is to talk about 30 minutes on chapter 3, about 45 minutes on chapter 4, and then the rest of the class is for you to work on your cases or assignments. Try to do most of it here if we can. As a reminder for everyone, when you do your cases or your case programs, please add your last name to the company name
Oh, that's
before
I've been putting the first name.
You said first name.
first or last
Okay.
will be appropriate.
Our class is special because everyone has original first name.
Yes, our class is special, yes. And also, turn the 2-line entry display under Options Global General. So if you go to the Sage software program, Options is a drop-down menu. Go to the Global function, and under the General tab, make sure that the 2-line entry display is chosen. So keep that in mind. And that's just a reminder.
I missed that.
Okay, that's fine. Options, Global, and then there's some tabs here, the General tab. And right in the middle, 2-line entry.
Okay.
That should be chosen. And get in the habit, guys, of doing that for every case.
Okay.
That will open up the screen to see not only a description or the account number, but also the name of the account number when you do your entries. That's why we would like a 2-line display. All right. Now, chapter 3 is entering in cash transactions. It also talks about creating new accounts, entering beginning balances again, and recording transactions in the general journal. There's also on page 76, talks about posting. And what does posting mean? In accounting, posting means what?
Put in your ledger.
Put it into your ledger account. Correct. Yep. And in Sage and all the accounting software programs out there, it's real time. So as soon as I hit the save button, it automatically posts. The old days we used to use a batch processing, which we don't do anymore. On page 79, As accountants, we use special journals. So there are 4 types: sales, purchases, cash payments, cash receipts. And even though we're not doing it in Chapter 3, there is a discussion on why do we have these special journals? And why do we record all of them in our special journals? And the reason for this is for audit purposes. I need to print out a cash receipts journal. I have to be sure all my deposits are there, right?
Right.
I can't have some reported on that report and some reported on a different one. Or if I have purchases on account, they need to be all on that same report. So for audit purposes, it's paramount that we do it this way, to be consistent. So that gets us back to the general journal. What entries go on the general journal? Or go into the general journal? What's the number one thing that goes in there? What do we do at the end of the month before we can print off our statements? We have to do what?
Adjusting entries.
Adjusting entries. Adjusting entries. What do we do at the end of the year?
Close.
Closing entries, which is kind of like a adjusting entry. That's also done in the general journal. Okay. Like we talked about last week, on page 79, a new company is created called Forward Thinking. It's a cash basis company, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with having a cash basis company. Most small companies are cash basis. So as a review, what does cash basis mean?
When you receive cash and when you pay cash. for it.
Yeah, when we receive cash, it's revenue to us. When we give the person a check, that's an expense to us. That's cash basis. The new company has a January starting first period. That's shown here. And again, be aware of our account types. Equity doesn't close means what? It's an investment. That's the only time we would use an equity that doesn't close. As a review, what's an equity that does close? What type of an account is that?
Drawing.
Drawing, not retained earnings. This you would only use this for the drawing account. And possibly if we're a corporation, it would be what? Dividends would be the other one, if we're a corporation. Remember we close out the dividends to the retained earnings at the end of the year?
Yeah.
That's an equity type that closes. And then obviously we would have the third equity, which is our retained earnings, which is where the profit, prior profit goes, right? From closed years, from prior years, that profit or loss goes into our retained earnings equity account. QuickBooks does the same thing. They have the same types as Sage does here. There's 3 of them. Number 1, equity doesn't close. Number 2, equity does close. Number 3, the retained earnings. On page then 85, graphic is the other Forward Thinking Graphic is the other company contained there. Just a couple of things. It goes through 92, 85 to 92. The process in Chapter 3 is to make a general journal entry. Watch your transaction dates. It's a very tedious process, but remember, when we post, that's the month and year that it goes into. We already talked about the Options Global feature that's also discussed here. And I want you to jump to page 87. Like the software, there's things that the textbook I don't like. So I will point them out because in real life, again, we have to be aware of these problems in the software itself. If you look at figure 315, they're making a general journal entry. 506, and the other entry is 100. We got a debit here for 1,200, and we have a credit here for 1,200. My problem with this is, what account is 506? It doesn't show us, right?
No.
It doesn't show us. That's the problem. And that is why we're doing this two-line entry. If you don't see the account name, if you do not see the account name when you're making your general journal entries, you don't have that global feature turned on properly. This two-line entry process. So I'm going to go into Sage. You can just watch here. General journal entry is on the shortcut list. You see here, I do have the two-line entry on. So if I turn this on, I'm going to just pick an account. You'll notice right away the account description shows with it. And that's what you would like when you're doing your entries, to be sure you're going into the right account, right? So if I did not have the two-line entry on, this is what it would look like. Options, global, general. I'm going to switch it back to the default, which is one line. Press OK. If I make my general journal now, you'll notice that when I pick an account, it doesn't show me the name. So that's why we do it. Okay? And that's what's showing in 315. It doesn't show you what account is 506. What would you assume 506 would be, though?
Expense.
Some type of purchase expense, right? 506 is in the cost of goods sold section. All right, and obviously 100 would probably be the checkbook, right? You're crediting, or you're buying something for credit or on cash. Okay, any questions, any thoughts on anything on so far? I try to just do a brief overview. Now, is it required that you go through the chapter line by line like you did in QuickBooks? No, I don't require that. If you just want to read it, kind of give an overview of what is found in the chapter, these notes, I try to make the top 10 list so you can follow that as well and just do the cases at the end. So it's up to you how much you wish to do. Page 2, adding new accounts. Where do we go? It's under the maintain. So if I go to Sage, let me get rid of this. Maintain is a menu, drop down, and you'll notice that basically everything that we have to set up, chart of accounts, new customers, new vendors, new employees, they are all inputted or entered under the maintain function. So maintain chart of accounts, it's the fourth one down. and that's where we add our account ID, we add our type, right? That's all done here. We did this in Chapter 2, but it's again reviewed in Chapter 3. They ask us to edit or change an account on page 93. Just change the name. And then the next objective on page 94 is to edit or change a previous entry. So let's say we debited something, we credited an account, we posted it, we saved it, but we found out we made a mistake. So obviously we can edit that journal entry, right? Or we can delete it entirely. So here are the steps. I'm hoping there is a list here. So if I go to my Sage and tasks is one way to get it. General journal entry is way down here under tasks. And at this point, it's asking me to make a new entry. Well, I don't want to do that, right? So I want to go to the list and find it on the list. And it is organized by period, right? So this month, for instance. So I'm just going to pick one. And it brings up the entry. So at this point, I can make a change to the amount or change the accounts. Or maybe I posted them backwards. We do that often, right? Or if I want to, I can delete it right here with the red X. I can delete the entry entirely if I wanted to. So those are what's talked about in Chapter 3. Now, I do have a warning message on this. Here it is. Why is deleting an entry dangerous?
Because Sage automatically posts things to other areas.
Yep.
So then you have to go back and find out where that was and then adjust that as well.
Yes, it hits a lot of accounts when we do post, exactly. And what if the entry we made in error was done last month? Right?
So you already closed your account?
I already closed the account. I already gave my statements to the bank. And now I go ahead and delete that entry. That's going to change all the financials. Or what if I filed the tax return for the year, right?
Mm-hmm.
The IRS doesn't like it when I change a closed year. Trust me. Remember that retained earnings question on the tax return?
Mm-hmm.
That's got to be the same. You can't change it on the IRS. You'll get a very big, nasty notice. What happened? Your income went up last year, and where did that? How come you didn't report that income, right?
Mm-hmm.
The retained earnings balance is different. Something is wrong. So whenever I got a new client, I quickly look at the retained earnings to see if it changed from what I showed last year. Because you'll get a return. You'll get their records, and you'll print off a balance sheet, and you'll see, oh my gosh, the retained earnings changed. They deleted something last year that they shouldn't have. So what, as an accountant, should you do instead of deleting? Adjustments. And the adjustment, I'm going to put here, current period. You cannot make the adjustment in a closed month or a closed year. I know that's where the mistake happened, and we want to fix it back there, but you can't. Is everybody clear on that? You'll have that entry concern when you get to your project. There's one of the adjusting entries that you will have to make for a closed period error. Now, the audit trail, I kind of covered it here, is under the reports and forms company. Is a awesome audit report.
Also,
Pardon?
how,
Audit report.
yeah, what makes it
The
awesome?
audit trail is the ability to see if you had a disgruntled employee that started deleting a lot of transactions.
Okay,
Even though it's disappeared in the system, the audit trail still tracks it.
that's good to know.
So if I found where maybe Sage didn't save it quite, they saved the debit side or credits and didn't save the credit, again, a software error, or an interruption when I was posting, I can find that problem in the audit trail report as well. So keep that in mind. Now, if I could have you turn to page 97, 98, please. Starting on 97, we talk about a reoccurring entry. And on page 98, actually 99, they talk about a memorized entry. Two different types of entries. So we have reoccurring, or we have memorized. Please know the difference between those two. Now, with a reoccurring, as soon as I enter a reoccurring entry, it posts automatically. So if I go to Sage again, let me show you where the reoccurring entry is. I've got to close some of these, so bear with me here. Well, I'm here. Why don't I just do it here? I've created my entry. This is a general journal entry. I can create a copy of this entry. What would be an example of an entry I would like to create automatically for the next 12 months?
The rental.
Rent?
Utilities.
Well,
So
that amount will
Oh, that
change.
covers it, yeah.
What's the big one?
Depreciation.
Depreciation, somebody said, yeah. So I know the debit, it's going to be a depreciation expense. I know the credit is going to be accumulated. And in most cases, many companies use the same amount every month. So it's nice to set up one entry and then say, create reoccurring, right? And I can tell it how many times I want it to reoccur. So for a year, I would put 11 because it does save the current transaction as well.
Okay.
So then you get the 12 months. So reoccurring are for those that have the same entry, same amount. And it posts automatically. So if I ran a financial statement, let's say I did this in January, and I ran a financial statement for February or March, my depreciation expense would automatically be there. Wouldn't have nothing else, but that entry would be there. That's what I mean by posts, right? All right. Now, a memorized transaction is in a totally different spot. So I'm now here on page 99. You have to recall a memorized. In other words, you'd have to find it on your memorized list and post it yourself. What type of entry would be good for that? A memorized one.
I know you buy on account often.
Maybe a customer that we invoice monthly, yeah. And maybe the amount changes every month, so we want to bring it up. Maybe it's got a lot of detail on the invoice, and we don't want to type that in every time. And the amount changes. That's the ideal memorized one. Or maybe your depreciation expense does change every month, so you just want to memorize the debit and the credit and not the amount. That's where the memorized is best used. So where is memorized found? It's in a different location. It's under maintain. So if I go to Sage, under maintain, it's way down on the bottom here. It's like the fourth from the bottom. Memorize transactions. And what's nice with the memorized transactions, I can do it on an invoice. I can do it on a general journal entry or a payment, a check, right? So all those options are there. Those are the ones that you can use memorization for. So remember, when I go into, let's say I want to memorize a general journal entry, let's just call it depreciation. I'm going to debit the expense. I hope they have depreciation expense. They should. Here they do. Okay, good. And I'm going to memorize the accumulated. Accumulated is an accumulated type, right? And I can put the amount in that normally is a default amount if I wanted to, and hit save. Now when I hit save, normally I think I'm posting it, but I'm not. On a memorized transaction, I'm just saving the debit and the credit. I'm not actually posting. It's different than reoccurring. Reoccurring, once I hit save, it's posted. Okay? So with this entry, I just save it, and it's saved to my list. So if I go here and close this, I go back into my maintain, memorized, come on, general journal entries. I need to search for it, right? Select it. And now it brings me to a new screen. This is my posting screen. So as soon as I select it, it brings it up to my posting screen. It asks me, well, what date do I want? What month am I in? I'm in my third period, right? So then I would hit save at this point, and it would save. Now it's posted at that point, but I have to select it first. So here are the steps again. I'm going to close this. So if I wanted to find an entry, a memorized transaction, I have to search for it, select it, and now in this case, it takes me to the screen where I would post it then. You notice that memorization didn't have the dollar amounts in. So now it forces me to put the amounts in. This is my payroll transfer entry from my regular checkbook to my payroll checkbook. Remember doing that in payroll? You had to post that transfer of money. Because most companies have a payroll checkbook and a regular checkbook. Why is that?
I always wondered about that.
It's for security purposes.
Okay.
You don't want your employees to know your regular checkbook account,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So it's a safety feature. So if some employee wanted to make their $500 check $5,000, that they're not drawing off your regular checking, which might have enough money to do that, versus your payroll, which is just the amount of the payroll.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
So it's for security, basically. I know most employers now have direct deposit, but in the old days, we had paid checks. And there were occasions where employees would open up a new account, right, and deposit that money into their account with more than they needed or should have. So it's a security feature.
My job does direct deposits, but for our Christmas bonuses, they give us checks.
Oh, really?
And
That's
40% of their profits they give to their coworkers, so it's
Oh,
like
wow.
a lot of money.
yes.
And they give us a time limit on when we can cash our checks or they're void because it's
Yep.
such a dramatic liability. It's
Yep.
crazy.
To have them out there. Yep. Exactly. Very good. It's surprising they give you a check for that. But That's interesting. Rather than a direct deposit of that amount too.
I think it's because our year end as a company is in October.
Okay. That could be,
I don't know.
yeah. And people like getting a check. I know one employee, when we switched from paper to direct, I think he was going to sue me or sue the company because he didn't think that was, a company could legally do that. But we can. It's legal.
Yep.
So he was going to get a lawyer. And he actually, after a while, he said, boy, it's nice not having going to the bank and making the deposit. So he eventually, but change is difficult for some people. You do it a certain way for so long, it's really upsetting when you make that change.
Human nature.
It's very human nature.
I hated it too, and I'm a young person.
I'm accountant, so we don't like to change, right? Consistent. All right. So I do have a question here next to my, I started using light bulb guy. Light bulb guy is basically, hey, I have a question, or hey, be aware of this. So here's my light bulb guy. Does creating and memorize post to the general ledger? And the answer is no. You're just creating it on a list that you select and then post later. Very good. All right, going forward, reports are discussed on pages 103 to 111. Lots of reports. If I could have you go to page 106, please, of your textbook. What report is shown on page 106? A general journal report. What's on a general journal report, guys?
The list of accounts and balances.
No, careful. It's not account balances. General journal is what?
All your
Transaction.
All your adjusting entries, right? Adjusting entries. What do you see on that report, or what don't you see that should be there?
depreciation.
The account name, Ruby said. Yes, I'm looking for the account name on. I have no idea what number 300 is. I don't have any idea what 506 is. So, when I ask for a general journal report, it's mandatory that you add to the report the GL description. Has to be there. Has to be there. So that's what I'm talking about. My next light bulb is, how do I get that GL description on the report? So I'm going to do the steps next. And obviously, the book talks about the column feature in this section. Columns will let me add a column of information, just like you did in QuickBooks, to the report. So here I go. I'm going to go to the general journal report. Should I do it the way under business status?
Yeah. And go down. You need
I
to-
can't go down any further.
General,
General ledger is the section.
and then
General journal report and display. And here it is. This is the default. There is no account name. Now there is a transaction description, but that is not what I'm looking for. So where do I go? On top,
Option.
I can go options, but I think I'm going to use columns. Go to columns and turn on the GL account description, which is right here on the bottom. Just turn on the X or check mark. Now, what happens if I don't move it? You see there's a move up and move down button? Let me just, some students will just turn it on and think they're done. So let me just show you what happens when you do that. I'm going to hit the apply button, and the account description appears at the end of the report, where should the name be?
Right next to the account number.
Right next to the number, right?
Mhm.
Wouldn't that make sense? It's much easier for me to read it. So if I move it up, underneath the account number, right? Press apply, and it moves it over, and then press OK. So now I know 10,300 is the payroll checking, 10,200 is the regular checking. The name for the number. You will have to do that on quite a few reports. The sales journal is another example where you have to add it. Cash receipts journal doesn't have the account name on it. So you have to add it on every report that I ask for. And I will remind you. What does the red line mean?
You go to another page.
Yes. Isn't that frustrating? Okay, I get a printout, PDF report. The debit's on one side, the credit's on the opposite side of the page. So I would like you to shrink this report to make it fit. So in Sage, just like in QuickBooks, I can use my left mouse and click and hold and drag it over so that it fits on one page. Now, well, I chopped off the transaction description. Well, I can, in most cases, understand what the type of entry it is. It's okay. Or if I wanted to, I can just shrink all of these columns down, right? Make them a little smaller, and then open up the transaction description so I can see more of it. So, as long as I don't see the red line, you should be good to print that out so that the debits and the credits come out. Now, before you submit, look at the reports, right? Before you submit your income statement or your balance sheet or whatever report I'm asking for, look at it before you submit it to me. Can you read it? Does it fit on one page? Because again, you don't want to give this to your boss with the debits on one side and the credits on the other. It's embarrassing. Because then you're going to have to redo it anyway.
So what if it's hard to read and then you can't fit in one page either?
Well, your other choice is you could go to options and page setup, right?
Right.
And go to
Landscape?
a landscape.
Okay.
So that will work in some cases. But again, either the recipient or the boss, they don't like landscape because they make a 3-hole punch
Yeah.
and it's got to be portrait. So you have to figure out what they would like. But you certainly can go landscape if you wish to. All right. I think that's it for page 2. Other reports discussed in Chapter 3 is an income statement, a statement of changes in financial position, and then finally a balance sheet. So let's go to the statement of changes in financial position, which is on page 110. We're almost done, guys, with Chapter 3 here. It's not a very common report. In fact, in the many years that I was in practice, I never actually did this one. But it is a statement of changes in financial position, sources of working capital, uses of working capital, right? And then an increase or decrease or net change in basically the equity section of the company. How much did it change? In this case, 111,145 positive, right, is the result of what we got. And where did we get most of our money from? Our equity went up that much. Where did most of it come from? Investment. From Miss Lopez for $108,000 is where we got most of our equity increase. So not a bad investment there for us. And obviously, where did it go? Into our cash for the most part. We haven't spent it yet. So keep that in mind. Also, guys, please know, page 107. There's some terms there on page 107 that you'll need for your case. Case questions. So identify that. There's what's on an income statement, what's on a statement of changes in financial position, what is working capital, what's on the balance sheet. Know what is on a statement or what those terms mean for the case questions for chapter 3. All right. Now, case on page 117. Johnson is the first chapter or first case that you need to download the backup file. All of us are using the 2018. So I did put out on Blackboard that file. Let me get there. This is Learning Plan 6. I do have the 2017 out there in case somebody did have the older software. But the last choice is Johnson & Johnson 2018 version. That is one I've already converted. So you should be able to download it to your USB, wherever, and then restore, right? It's a PTB, which means Peachtree Backup, right? Don't click on it expecting it to open up, because it's not. You can't, it's not like Excel, where you have an Excel file, double click on it and it opens up. It don't work that way. You have to restore from within the software. Is everybody cool on restoring? Okay, so once you have the file, on page 117 then, you will enter these transactions. And after the transactions are completed, you will do an income statement for the month of January. Remember, with the cases, they're all 2017 dates. I think when you restore, they should be in the correct period automatically. But watch your dates, right? As you enter your transactions on page 117, be aware you have to change your posting dates. All right? Now, if there's a transaction that lands on the same day, there's multiple with the same date, you can put them in one date if you wish to. So that's fine. Now, let's just do the first one together. So if I'm in Sage, I'm going to make a journal entry. December 4th. December. How about January 4th? I don't know where I got December from. Paid rent for $2,500 for January. Set up a reoccurring transaction. Use 12 as the number of times the transaction will recur.
Why do we use 12 there instead of 11?
Ah, that's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
I like to use 11. Here's why. So I'm going to make this January 4th. I'm going to keep it 2019. Don't yell at me. I'm just going to call it rent. What's the entry, though?
Rent expense.
I'm going to debit it, right?
Yeah, rent expense for $2,500 and then cash.
That's if I have a rent expense here. I hope I do. Yep, rent or lease. Good. And I know there is a description line for the transaction description. Don't worry about adding that. That's not necessary. There's a lot of typing for not a reason for us. So I can just go over to the debit, 2,500. And what am I crediting?
Cash.
Cash. Now,
They use the account, checking account. Not
checking, yes. Get in the habit, guys. If you see multiple cash types, cash, I think I put the slush fund one in last time. Cash on hand, petty cash, those are not the ones that the checks come out of, right?
No.
So you won't use those. You'll be using the checking account for your credit side of the entry.
Okay. The checking.
Don't use petty cash, don't use cash on hand. What is petty cash, guys?
Just a small amount set aside for stuff.
Yeah, remember doing the accounting one, you write out a check, you went to the bank, you got dollar bills,
Mhm.
and you put it in the office, and you kept it safe in a lockbox, right?
Yep.
And most companies today don't have petty cash laying around. Why? People steal it. Yeah. In fact, the person that stole from our company, that's how she started. She found out that nobody was watching, right? Then she got bigger and bigger and bigger. She added hours to her paycheck, and once nobody found that out, then she went to writing out full-blown checks to herself as a vendor. So stuff to watch for. Create reoccurring. It asks this question. You're about to save this transaction that is not in the current period. Do you want to continue? Say yes. Here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to make this the next month, February 4th, right? And after 11. If I said 12, starting with January 4th, I'm actually going to post it twice. Because this is what happens. I'm going to press OK, right? Oh, maybe it did work. So now if I go to my list, does it show it here? That just shows the entry. Where do I go now to see how it posted? What report should I look at? I made the recurring entry. What should I look for?
General ledger.
General ledger, very good, Tom. Excellent. So let's go to the general ledger to see how I post. Why not general journal, Tom?
Because that's just the entries.
That's just the adjusting entries,
Yeah.
right? Or the entry that we just put in. Correct. Now look at the period I'm in. I'm in March, right? I need to change it to January. Go to options. First period to third. January 4th? Oh, it didn't show it. Here it is. Here's my February.
Show the January then?
Ah, so I did. It should be 12. Yeah.
Okay.
I always thought
I think when
it was
you
always
start-
the future, and then you'd save the current one that you had entered.
But didn't you put 11 when you're doing it, Paul?
Yeah, that's why if I think I put 12, it would have saved the January one with the other 11.
Yeah, you put 11, right? You didn't
I did put 11.
You have to put 12.
I think you have to put 12.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not 11.
So try it when you do yours, right?
And the
Try it
ledger
and see
report.
how it works.
Okay.
Now, I posted it. What if I wanted to reverse it? Can I reverse that reoccurring entry?
Yeah, you can go to fix.
I'd have to go to each one and...
No, I mean you have to go back to the,
You think so?
yeah. You mean you don't want it recurring, right? Recurring.
Oh yeah, you can. That's right. So if I go to my general journal, I go to my list, go to my rent. That's what we called it, right? and I hit delete, this and all reoccurring. There is that choice. So I could back it out if I wanted to and start over, which is kind of nice, right? But it says this transaction and all remaining. Remember, I started in March. It doesn't go backwards. Why doesn't it go backwards? Like February. We have a February one.
Because it's closed already.
It's closed already. Smart program, isn't it? Because you can never change a closed period. Fascinating. All right, now I'm going to add the word careful. With your debits and your credits. The entire entries will be done general journal. So all these transactions on page 117, make sure you're putting the debit correctly and what's the credit correctly. A lot of times I see students put them in backwards. Okay, so be careful. These are all entries you should know what the debit is and what the credit is. So this is a good practice of our debits and credits. This will be the only time, I just hit a bug. This will be the only time that we'll be doing transactions that should be used for special journals as a general journal entry. So, so it's just good practice on that. And then make sure again that you add your first name to the company name. That's it. That's chapter 3. Any questions on what we just covered? I'm going to stop my recording. Let's take our first break here, guys.